Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome to all of you for this webinar on digital transformation. Today, we will have this short webinar focusing on digital solutions for sustainability and resilience. My name is Vincent Chanron from the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Japan, and I will be the master of ceremony for today. And just before we start, just a few quick points to make sure that you enjoy the event the best way as possible. Just as a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, which means that we will be able to share the link with you after the event is complete, and you can share it with some of your colleagues if you think that the content was worthwhile. We will have some presentation from our speakers, which I will introduce in a minute, but we also have some time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any comments or questions, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you think of a question for the speaker at any point, just type it in there, and I will either pose it to our speakers at that time or at the end of their presentation, or hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the event. And we'll try to address all of the questions, and when we run out of questions, we will end the webinar. The webinar will be held exclusively in English, and today's presenters will be Matteo Bortesi, who is partner at EY Japan, Philippe Godbout, who is Japan Managing Director of Dassault Systèmes, Alain Dardy, who is Representative Director and CEO at Energy Pool Japan, and Dirk Hermans, who is Associate Partner at EY Japan. But at this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Nicolas Bonardel, who is the General Manager of the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Japan, and who is going to start today's event. Nicolas, it's all yours. Nicolas, you are on mute.
Okay, sorry. I say thank you, Vincent, and thank you, all of you, ladies and gentlemen. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to this third big business leader forum for you. So taking part in this webinar, so belonging to, as I said, our events, a series of thought leadership conference organized by the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Japan now for 4 years in a row now. So these events are tailored to foster cooperation between the French and Japanese business communities and beyond. And the high point of this Business Leaders Forum will be the 4th edition of the French-Japanese Business Summit on November 9 at the Nikkei Hall, so dedicated to visions for 2050. So we hope we could have the pleasure to welcome you as well at this occasion, online or on the spot. Now, regarding today's webinar, digital transformation has been high on the agenda of executives for several years now, but last year, the COVID has made it moving up the priority list even more. Businesses have had to find ways to operate with their workers 100% remotely, to find new sales channels, and their resilience has been tested. We, therefore, decided to focus this webinar on digital solution for sustainability and resilience. So I would like to extend my thanks to the 4 high-level speakers who accepted to give us an overview of the digital transformation in Japan, as well as a concrete example of solutions which you can implement in your company. You will enjoy this webinar and looking forward to seeing you on the Business Summit in Tokyo in November. So thank you, and Vincent, it's on you now.
Yes. Thank you, Nicolas, for this introduction and for linking indeed towards the main topic of our business summit in November, which will focus sustainability. Just in terms of agenda, before I introduce all of the speakers, we will have about a bit less than an hour around 4 presentations that you will see. And towards the end, as I said, we will have Q&A from the audience, from you, so don't hesitate if you want to share anything at this point and to ask any questions. But first of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Matteo Bortesi, who is, as I said, is a partner at EY Japan. And Matteo, if you can just introduce yourself, and he will present us digitalization trends in Japan. So Matteo, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vincent and Nicolas. Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be part of this event today. And about myself, yes, I am partner in EY based here in Tokyo. This is my second time here in Japan, and overall I spent more than 10 years in Japan, so in EY. And what I'm going to introduce today is a kind of challenge, because I would like to present a point of view around the digital trends, the digital transformation in about 10 minutes, which is kind of difficult. And I think we could talk for hours just about what we mean with the digital. But I will try to go through into my main point of view, main messages, which then we can also discuss further in the question and answers. So first we can have a look, we can have an overview, a kind of teaser of what the digital landscape is here in Japan. A point of view on what's happening in the sectors, in the industry sectors, then challenges and opportunities. Again, looking at the specific context here in Japan. So if we go to a brief overview, we can go to the next slide already. Well, here, you know, the situation in Japan is a bit mixed because we all know that Japan is a very developed economy, and Japan has been investing heavily in digital infrastructures, for instance, mobile networks, fiber to the home, where it is one of the best economy in the world. So the infrastructures are there, which is very much needed, you know, as a platform in order to enable digital for business and for the society. On the other hand, based on surveys and also our observations, Japan lags behind in many other elements which are needed in order to enable a digital transformation, like, you know, the business agility, the availability of talents in business and technologies to enable digital. And we will have a little bit more insights on where the challenges are, specifically in Japan, in order to enable digital. But again, on one side, strong network infrastructures, but not a strong ability at the moment in the public and private sector to drive digital transformation. This is also confirmed if we look at a comparison between Japan and the US, for instance. On the top, on the right side of the slide, on the top right, you see that less than 50% of organizations, companies in Japan are either planning or executing digital programs, which is much lower to what we see in Japan. Now, the arrival of the unfortunate COVID-19 situation has even stressed the situation more. And for instance, 1.5 years ago, when COVID impacted also Japan, only 28% of the companies were ready to enable the workforce to work from home. And the ability to react quickly to this situation, the COVID-19 situation in Japan, has been more challenging than in other markets in Europe and US, even if the situation has been improving quite a lot. And this is a positive sign which we have to see. Let's go to the next slide. This is a perspective more from regulations and government. We all know that the Japanese government has been looking at enabling the digitalization and innovation within the Japan economy. With the arrival of COVID-19, this has accelerated. And because, of course, these are multi-year programs. So there are government initiatives in order to digitalize, to change regulations, rules, policies, in order to enable a quicker digital transformation. An example could be the Hanko, the seals, which is one of the symbol of the Japanese processes and bureaucracy, which is a stopper in many ways, to the digitalization of the country. Or My Number, which is now more and more streamlined into many different type of services at government level. So we see an acceleration, or the government in Japan sees this as a much higher priority than what it used to be just a couple of years ago. And this is an opportunity, of course, for the organizations doing business in Japan. The government is also trying to look at the private sector and looking at incentives where, for instance, tax incentives, where investment into digital transformation can be depreciated in a different way. So that's another area which we should look closely in the next month in order to benefit from this type of incentives. And finally, in specific areas triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, in looking at the public infrastructures for the digital schools in order to allow lessons from home. This is also happening in the private sector, as already mentioned, for remote work, but it's also touching the health system, how to provide health services remotely. Again, there's a lot of policies and regulations, and security matters that goes together with it. And even the law system has been touched with the intention of digitalize and make many of the civil litigations online, which much better agility to move into those cases. So I think this is a promising fact that there is an acceleration also pushed by the government in enabling a quicker digitalization across many different areas of the Japanese business and society. Now, if we go to the next point I wanted to highlight is having a look at by sector. Here I have selected 4 sectors which I think have a high potential in regards with the digitalization and digital transformation. The first one is healthcare. We all know that, well, in Japan, the aging population is a very important factor, not only for digital transformation, but in general for the society. And this is an area where anyway, digitalization and emerging technologies are already having a very big impact. There is a big potential here in Japan because there are also several organizations playing into the health system business from a technology and health services organizations. And here we see a big potential, especially around telemedicine and health devices, which can really disrupt this sector in a positive way. So high potential here in Japan. The second one is about wholesale and retail. Well, this was when we had the COVID situation a year and a half ago. This was, together with the transportation sector, was the other sector which was immediately impacted by the COVID restrictions. And at that point, we also understood that in Japan, only 6% of the overall retail market is online, which is much lower than what we see in other markets. And it was quite a big problem for many of the Japanese product and retail companies. There was a reaction to that, but it's also difficult to go online and digital just in a few months. So that is an area which anyway is going to continue. And I think there is a big potential here in Japan for several organizations to develop stronger business to consumer capabilities. In many cases in Japan, it's not even business to consumer, it's business to consumer. Product companies selling to wholesalers, which are then selling to the consumers, like department stores and other groups. So the ability to reach directly the market with the omni-channel capabilities is key, and we see a lot happening at the moment in these months in Japan. The third one is the industrial manufacturing, supply chain manufacturing. This is the backbone, or still the backbone of the Japanese economy. Very developed, but still very much based on hardware and robotics, physical robots. Now here there is the need to really push more toward the software and robotic process automation in this sector, also leveraging artificial intelligence. There is the need to modernize a lot the entire manufacturing supply chain sector in Japan. And also there we see a large investment happening in the last months. Then the final point is about the final sector I would like to mention is financial services. Of course, it's a large sector, 4% of the national GDP. And well, we all know is still very legacy in the way that the services are provided, paper-based, people, processes-based, and also the technologies are behind what we see in many developed markets, but not only developed markets. We see a lot of developing markets in Asia, for instance, which have a much more modern financial service sector. Here the problem is also that there is a very heavy legacy IT load, which is difficult to upgrade, modernize, or decommission. So there are challenges, but we see good signs also in the financial services going toward mobile banking and more modern way to interact online with the customers. So this is the other sector which I see with the big potential in Japan. Of course, all sectors are impacted by the digitalization, the acceleration of the digitalization, because this is the main point. Digitalization is happening since 50 years. But what's happening in the last, I would say, 5 years is the acceleration of the digitalization, very much pushed by the consumer markets. And the big corporates have to follow and be very agile in reaching out to the opportunities that we see now within the digital era. So if we go to the next slide, I would like to talk a bit about the challenges. And the challenges in Japan. And the first point I would like to talk about is the culture and the talent. I think you all know how much this is important here in Japan. And there is first of all a lack of talents in the IT, digital, but also business space in order to enable many of the digital projects and programs that we are running. In other markets, this is mitigated by accessing talents and resources globally. In Japan, it's more difficult, also for a language issue. The second point is the willingness of the top management in many situations to really drive change and digital transformation. Because many times they see that as a way to expose their organizations to a risk, and they tend to stick to the business as usual type of organization and businesses. So there is also a problem at management level, as well also a typical kind of rigid organization and how the companies are organized traditionally. The second aspect is about legacy IT. I have already mentioned about that. Japan has been investing a lot in IT in the last 40 years, large data centers and legacy infrastructures. Unfortunately, not always standardized in a global industry way. Many of the applications are custom built This is a huge problem. More than 50% of the IT cost is just maintaining a legacy IT infrastructure, which should be decommissioned or modernized. So this is one of the challenge. Vendor dependency. Many of the Japanese organizations have outsourced or they rely on external IT vendors only, and they have very limited in-house IT capabilities. In US, it's very different. They do also outsource a lot in the United States and in Europe, but they keep minimum viable IT organization in-house in order to drive the innovation within their organizations. The last aspect is about the operating models, how to drive innovation and digitalizations. In Japan, IT is still seen as a cost center and not as an enabler of the transformation. And in many situations, there is also a lack of strategic vision, which can push for a different organization. The organizations are siloed into marketing, customer care, IT, supply chain, and there is not a cross-functional organization which can enable the overall innovation and transformation. This is a challenge everywhere, not only in Japan, but if you look, for instance, at the US market, we see that the organizations are typically more agile and able to drive and innovate through new operating models. Okay, so we go to the next slide, the opportunities. As you see, I am running quite quickly in order to provide as many messages as possible. I hope that at the end, anyway, we can have some time for questions and answers. There are challenges, but there are more opportunities than the challenges, and we can overcome the challenges, of course. Here, I would like to mention, first of all, what I said at the beginning. What's happening now with COVID is very important and is going to last. This is, if you want, also an opportunity to change. It's happening. And for Japan, it's a great opportunity. I am very optimistic that this is not going to end at the end when we solve the COVID-19 pandemic. This is going to continue. So this is a big opportunity for Japan. The second one is software as a service and cloud journey. I think that Japan is still halfway in that journey, in getting away of these on-premise large data centers and moving to a cloud, agile, and software as a service model. Big opportunities there also for Japanese software providers. The next point is about the government. I've mentioned that the government as an enabler for the transformation by reforms and by promoting new policies for the digitalizations, and also the government as a place where digitalization happens. In 2019, only 7% of the Japanese citizens have applied to any kind of service online for the public services at the government. Only 7%. It's one of the lowest percentage worldwide. So even the government can be the place where digitalization happens, and then the private sector can follow. On the top right, the ICT industry. I have mentioned earlier that there's a lot of legacy there, but in Japan there are also very big IT players. So the digitalization, investment in digital, will make it grow, that sector, and potentially not only in Japan, but beyond Japan, especially in Asia Pacific. The next point is about new revenue streams. Digitalization is not only a new way to operate, but it is a new way to connect to partners, to create ecosystems, to create new business models, and to generate more revenues. This is the biggest opportunity. And this is what we see happening at a different scale, for instance, in China. This is the biggest opportunity, which also Japan organizations should look after. Digitalization as a way to upgrade and gain new revenues, not only as a way to operate more efficiently. The next point is about the industry transformation, what I mentioned earlier, supply chain and manufacturing, the digitalization of that industry, which is just massive, is going to present a very big investment in Japan and also be a kind of enabler of the entire ecosystem in Japan to become digital. For instance, with the introduction of new technologies like blockchain. We already have examples of blockchain technology introductions into supply chain, and it's very promising. I think Japan as an economy should look after this type of platforms. And the last one is sustainability. Sustainability is the way to do business today, is the way to do business in the future. It's a vision, it's a purpose. And the sustainability goes very much together with digital. Sustainability is giving the direction to digital, but digital is making sustainability possible thanks to the adoption of data analytics and big data tools. So I see very much as sustainability and digital going together and representing the way that our organization should prioritize the way that we develop our business. We have our employees work, we interact with our customers and partners, and finally to the society. So I think that today in the next sessions, we will see some examples on how digital and sustainability can go together, and we'll be very happy to have follow-up conversations with you on some of the points that I have very quickly touched today as this introduction. So Vincent, I hope that I managed well my time, and back to you.
You did not, Matteo, but that's okay because we knew that. So thank you so much for your intervention, and that's why we wanted also to have you right at the beginning, because I think it was important before we move into some of the specific examples that we hear from kind of this overview. So I knew and we knew that this was going to be a bit longer than we had thought, but anyway, I think it was very interesting, especially because you touched about a number of points that our next speakers will talk about. So it was great introduction. Thank you, Matteo. Next is Philippe Godbout. So as I introduced him earlier, he is the Japan Managing Director at Dassault Systèmes. And we will go towards more cities and communities, and especially talking about some of the solutions in terms of virtual twin for sustainable cities. So Philippe, the floor is yours, and I'll let you share your screen.
Merci beaucoup. Hello to everyone, and thank you for having me here today. It's a great opportunity for me to share with you about Dassault Systèmes. So my name is Philippe Godbout, as mentioned. I am in charge of our team here in Japan. I moved here a year and a half ago, just before the lockdown. So, but it's my third time now living in Japan. The first time was 20 years ago. When I came here. So I have some experience of working in Japan despite the current pandemic. So first of all, let me share with you what is Dassault Systèmes. So we are the 3D experience company. We deliver solution for engineers and scientists. So within the next 10 minutes, I would like to introduce you how our virtual twin contributes to the future of cities. So I think all of you will agree with me that we are entering into a new period of innovation. I think industries are entering into new cycle of innovation driven by sustainability and characterized by a human-centric approach.
Philippe, so just a short point. I thought you would be sharing my screen, your screen. Do you want me to share your screen as a backup? Or?
I thought it was being shared. It's not shared.
We don't see it. So if
okay, let me see if I can share. Oh,
it's me sharing, but I only have the PDF. So if you can share,
I will do. Sorry, I thought. Yuko-san, you cannot share. Ne? Okay. Let me see. Okay, let me try that. Then, all right. Let me know if you see my screen now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
All right. So as I was mentioning, sorry about that. We are entering into a new period of innovation, and I think what we are seeing is that there's an acceleration for the desire of company to transform and understand better how their company can deal with this innovation utilizing digitalization. So the good news is that this is what we are doing at Dassault Systèmes, and therefore we have defined 3 different segments for which we can help company using technology in order to address the need of transformation. Our approach is really aligned with what we see as the Japan direction, looking at the society of the future. And of course, in the 3 different segments, we have provided different technology that was originally defined maybe in the manufacturing aspect. We also entering into a life science and healthcare industry. But today, what I want to share with you is a little bit what we're doing, utilizing virtual twin for infrastructure and cities. So let me see if that video will work for you.
Maybe you can go in presentation mode, because right now we're on your PowerPoint.
Okay, hold on. I think it's on presentation mode on my side.
Yeah, it's on your screen, but not on ours for some reason. Do you want me to try on my screen?
I think my video will not work on your screen for sure. How do I do that? Preview.
Can they show my screen? Because I'm sharing mine, but it's not broadcasted. That was.
Okay, let me try again. Another way to share. Entire screen doesn't work. Chrome tab. No. So now you are seeing my screen, right?
Right.
And when I go in presentation mode, what are you seeing?
No, we don't see the presentation mode. I think it might work on my computer. If you don't mind, I'll give it a try.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a video for you that you're not going to be able to see. Well, I had a few videos for you, and you're not going to be able to see that.
I can see from my side. Okay. I was able to see.
You were able to see the video?
Yeah.
Great.
It was working? Oh, yes.
Spectacular, complex, and seemingly impossible. For every generation, the progress of our civilization has taken enormous leaps. Throughout history, visionary leaders have redefined how we live, commute, and work, making life in cities profoundly safer and better. But our modern urbanized life poses a tremendous strain on our future. The well-being of our citizens is challenged by overloaded infrastructure and environmental risks. Today's pioneering policymakers, urban innovators, and builders must envision the resilient and sustainable cities of tomorrow, requiring not only a transformation of how our living environment is made, but more essentially, what our living environment is. Dassault Systèmes' 3D Experience platform empowers the visionaries of construction, cities, and territories to reimagine, design, simulate, and build the next generation of cities and infrastructures, extending and enhancing the real world with the virtual world, enabling better planning, more accurate predictions, and decisions, connecting the entire value chain into a unique collaborative ecosystem, discovering new ways to create and deliver the built environment, centering innovation around the citizen experience, building a sustainable legacy by harmonizing product, nature, and life. In a future made possible by virtual universes, experience the future today.
All right, so So basically what we're doing is we're looking at the different challenges that the industries are facing. And what we can see is that industries are now connected in a way that they're trying to find solution to really complex, difficult challenges around sustainability for the human. So the knowledge that we have, incorporating the different industries that we have, with the 3DX platform, what we can do is we can leverage and collaborate on the cloud using simulation and automation tools, digitalization and digital continuity between information that are coming from the different needs, and being able to make different decisions as it relates to how society and people living in this society can live. So that's really what the platform enables us to do. And we have a few examples that I would like to share with you quickly. So if you go to the next chart, this is an example with the city of Rennes. So it's a metropole in France for which we have developed a project with her around smart city, around their initiative. Basically, they wanted to understand how can they make the city more livable. They wanted to understand how it can become more resilient. All the urban areas can be developed. So for that, they needed to have different people, different social and economic, political people that work together and try to understand what are the possibilities and what are the choices that they can make in order to improve the quality of the life and the quality of the city itself. So by utilizing our 3D Experience City solution, we had people that could collaborate, could evaluate, and could simulate how the city would look like. So there is a video there also right after, if you think you can run it. And let me explain you a little bit in what we're trying to do here is having all of these people looking at what are the current infrastructure that they have, simulating where different infrastructure are existing, where they could develop them in terms of different services, and therefore starting to make decision on where were the best location, for example, in this case, to make the different subway station that were needed for the development of the city. So in collaboration with the city of Rennes, the officials, different resident businesses, partners that they have and service provider came together in terms of simulation of how the urban life could become, utilizing the knowledge of what's in the platform and simulating virtually what could be in the future. So that was a significant project, very successful, helping them to develop their city. So I have another example, if you go to the next chart, which is with the city of Kyoto. So it's called the Cahierre project. And our role there was working with them for their Cahierre Science City as creating the 3D virtual twin model of the city. In that project, basically, again, it was simulating, and I think there's a video if you want to start it there, just on the right side. Yeah, so as you can see here, we are evaluating, putting in context the different services that are available for a citizen that wants to use bicycle in order to go at the different site in the city. So we're evaluating where are the different point of services where they can drop their bicycle, where other services to repairs maybe are, and then in order for the city to better understand where they should invest their development, so that make it more easy for a citizen to live and for visitors to come and benefit from the city. So on that, we had the deputy governor of Kyoto Prefecture that was really a sponsor and understood very the value of what technology that we bring can do for their city and for their development. And that's just one aspect of what smart city has become in Japan. And we can see much more of these smart city projects evolving now in Japan and very important for us. So in conclusion, I'd like to share with you what is the real purpose of what we do at Dassault Systèmes and what we really believe we can do, which is using the virtual world to understand better the real world and provide some solution in order to improve it. So if we can do it and simulate it in the virtual world, definitely we know that we can do it better in the real world. And that's, in essence, what we do at Dassault Systèmes, utilizing our 3D experience technology. So I'll be open for question, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here, but I hope you got to understand a little bit of what we do at Dassault Systèmes.
Great, thank you so much, Philippe. No, if it showed anything, is that having a twin of a virtual twin of your presentation in my computer was pretty helpful. So I think it was a good demonstration as well with what you were saying.
Next time we'll do it through the platform directly, and it's going to be even more efficient.
All right, that would be great. Thank you so much, Philippe. And we'll go into right away. I actually have a few questions on this, but because we're running late on time, I'll keep that for the end for the discussion. And just a reminder that any of you can ask any question on the Q&A platform. But right now, we're going to go to Alain. Alain Dardy is the Representative Director and CEO at Energy Pool Japan. And he will share with us, we had an interesting discussion on this topic because he will share with us an interesting tool, I guess, or solutions that they've developed, which will definitely help, which has already helped the Japan's grid and electricity in terms of decarbonization and resiliency, and which can probably be extended to other solutions too. So Alain, the floor is yours. I hand it over to you, and I'll share your presentation.
Thank you, Vincent. And of course, thank you very much to the CCIFG for having Energy Pool talk today. It's very appreciated to have this opportunity because we are not such a big company as Dassault Systèmes or EY, so thank you very much. So today I will talk about digitalization in the energy sector. So I will not say the whole title because actually it's maybe the longest PowerPoint title ever. So can you go to the next slide, Vincent? Thank you. So just a short presentation of who we are, because I guess not many know about Energy Pool. So Energy Pool was founded in 2009, a small French company. And you can see in the lower hand side of this slide, it's not in Paris like many companies or in the Paris region, it's in the Alps. So very nice region with a nice lake and mountains all over. And it's situated in what we call Savoie Technolac, where you have a kind of a cluster of energy-related companies. They are in PV, hydro, hydrogen, and like us, demand response or smart energy systems. So we started in Japan in 2014. Today we have 6 gigawatts of power under management, 4 operating centers, around 100 staff. We're a little over 90 already. And just to give you the size, it's just 10 million euro gross margin. So we are small, but we are quite agile to take a really trendy word and one that Matteo used before. And you can see here in the picture, it's our operating center. Though this was the old world, because today you can see I'm not in the office, I'm working at home. And actually all the staff that is on this picture, they are all working in front of the computer with the same screens, but just on a small monitor. And it's just going very smoothly. It works perfectly. So fully digitized, fully at home. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here is a concrete example of the challenges that we face today. So of course, Mr. Suga said, yeah, I want to be zero carbon in 2050. In 2030, we'll go not to 23% less CO2 compared to 2013, but to 46%. So suddenly the ambition jumped, doubled, and 2030 is tomorrow if you think about infrastructure that you have to build and reinforce. So it's a very big challenge, but of course we can do it. And what happens when you have a new system in fast transition, you can have issues stabilizing things. So here I'm showing a concrete example of what happened this winter. So it was winter 2020, here 21, here is January. So you have upper left hand a picture from NHK that because it was a huge problem, so it was on the morning news of Japanese television. And so what happened? You can see the four quadrants. It was super cold. The solar PV panels, they were covered with snow, so no energy from solar PV. So you try to have more renewables, but sometimes it doesn't work. So you need resiliency and backup plans like we just saw before. And then also LNG Busoku, so we didn't have enough gas because there was huge storm. Ships couldn't physically come to Japan and unload the LNG. And on top of that, there was a huge, traffic jam at the Panama Canal to bring new LNG tankers to Asia. So there were a lot of issues piling up. And as you can see in the lower right side of this NHK picture, only 2 nuclear power plants were working because, of course, since 2011, not many nuclear power plants are working in Japan. So you had a lot of factors that led to a very tight situation. And this situation, you can see on the right-hand side, you have here the capacity. So it's how much capacity you have in you can generate and what is the demand. When you are over 93%, you start having problems. And here you can see in all regions of Japan, especially Kansai, because they were at 99%, you had no margins. And when you get super tight, you risk to have a complete blackout, which nobody wants, of course. And you know that at the exact same period, it happened in Texas. So Japan managed better, but it was very tight. And you can see also lower right-hand side, what happened on the spot price market for electricity. It was so tight that average price, daily price, it was on about 10 yen for 2 years, and suddenly it's back at 90. The price was multiplied by 9. So once that happens, you really have a very difficult situation. It's very difficult to procure energy, and it's becoming very difficult also to manage the balance. So that was the situation. So maybe you can go to the next slide to see. So here, what happened on our side, we were asked, okay, we try to put as much generation as we can, but we have no gas, solar PV out. Really, we ask you, Energy Pool, with your IoT and software system, to lower electricity from your industrial customers. So you can see here, from January 5 to 15, we made operations 2 weeks in a row. It was the first time, because usually when we ask an industry, for example, someone who do auto parts for Honda, and we tell him, okay, lower your electricity and your demand, okay, they have to lower production. They say, okay, we will do it on Monday. And then we tell them, do it on Tuesday, do it on Wednesday. And then you start messing up with our production plan. So it's very difficult for them to follow, but you can see here on the curve, the 4 ovals, they were very collaborative, and they lowered collectively the consumption, those 4 days, and then again 5 days. And so you had 4 days, 8 days from in TEPCO, 1 day in Kansai, and they all contributed to this. And that's one of the reasons I will not say it's thanks to Energy Pool. It would be a little brazen, but we contributed, and every little step counts. And here is thanks to digitalization, of course. Okay, can you go to the next slide? So here another picture and another example. Here is more about resiliency. So here you might remember we had people were in Tokyo actually on that time. We had a huge typhoon in September 2019. It put 1 million houses out of electricity, so it was quite large scale. And the picture on the right-hand side is from Chiba, Minami-Boso, because there are some people, they were without electricity for 2-3 weeks. So it was really, really a strong typhoon. So you could say, okay, it was a typhoon, so 1 million people without electricity, so you had much less demand. So you, Energy Pool, you didn't have to lower demand from industrial customers because demand was already lower. But what happened, of course, is that big generation plants, they were cut also from the network. And then the situation became really dramatic. And we were asked again, please, we know it's a typhoon, you people are all over, we don't know if they are in front of the computer, we don't even know if they are electricity, but do something. And we lowered electricity also on that day and for 2 days. So can you go to the next slide just to illustrate that? So we lowered on September 9 and September 10, and you can see what happened. Of course, it's typical what happened in the summer. The solar PV starts going down, but still peak demand is very high, mostly driven by air conditioning. And then at this time, so here from 4 to 7 or from 6 to 6 at the evening, people at TEPCO ask us and other demand response providers, really, your customers, they have to, that you manage, we ask them, please consume less for those 3 hours. It's key. At this time, the situation is very tight. So here you can see when in many situations, digitalization can really provide much more resiliency and sustainability to the grid. And of course, without electricity, the economy doesn't run. So it's quite key for the infrastructure and the whole economy of Japan. And can you go to the next slide? So here I take a kind of a zoom out because we are talking about digitalization today. And before I talk a little more about data, I think there are so many illustrations of that, or I won't spend too much time, but it's really striking to see really how we switch from the age of infrastructure and oil to the age of data. Here you have the market caps of this, and in 2021 it wouldn't change, except the market cap of Apple or Alphabet will be even bigger. But it's really to show you the huge shift that we are currently living, and really we are in the digital age. Can you go to the next slide? So here is just a very hands-on example of what does that mean, all this. So you want to have a lot of data and to manage it, but what does it mean concretely? Then you get a lot of data, and us, we are not a huge company. We just have 100 customers connected to our systems, but still we get 1 million data points every 2 days to manage, and it piles up, and it's just for Japan. I'm not talking about France or Turkey, where we also operate. And to analyze, and really the key, because it's easy to put sensors everywhere and to get huge data, but what is key is, do you have the right people to analyze it? So beyond the data, the most important is really the data scientist. So that's one point, or other people who manage the data and who are between the people who collect the data and the people who have the business insights. Can you go to the next slide, please? So here, one example it's regarding data management. For example, here it's a refrigerated warehouse. On the left-hand side, you have a forecast. If you forecast it well, you manage it better, of course. So the blue line is a model done by a physicist, a specialist in thermodynamics. He made a model. He's a super smart guy, and he does this forecast. But you can see the green line is much closer to the real temperature. So the forecast is much more accurate. Of course, you spend a lot of CPU cycles and a lot of power, but today, quite frankly, data and computation power is very cheap. So you iterate, and through brute force, you get a much better forecast. So that's really the world we are in now. Can you just click, because yeah. And thanks to that, because okay, you get a good forecast. So what? Since you optimize better your energy, you can get 15% savings on electricity. So you use less energy, you use it at a better time, so it's cheaper, and it's of course less electricity. It means it's better for the environment. So you get a complete win-win. Can you go to the next slide? So last, I want to show you something what we can do concretely for forecast and how you can contribute to concretely to the environment. What you are doing is that forecast, we can do solar PV forecast. So solar PV forecast is quite easy. It's completely driven by weather forecast. It's not rocket science. So first you do that. Can you go to the next slide? Then you do consumption forecast. Consumption forecast, it's very easy for buildings and residential because it's temperature driven, but it's much harder for factories. So we do it for factories because they have huge consumption and they have a lot of variation. So thanks to this forecast, we have a better idea of what the cap is between the planned consumption and the planned generation of the next day. And what happens here is that with solar PV forecast, consumption forecast, and very recently, we just started on July 1st, spot price forecast, you can have a good idea of what the market will be in 2 days, 1 day. Then here, what we have started since April of this year is a real virtual power plant. So the power plant is our industrial customers. We ask them to not consume less this time, but we ask them to consume more. They consume more because we know that there will be too much solar PV. So rather than wasting the solar PV at, I don't know, 2 yens on the market, you ask the customers, okay, consume more at this time, it's to still be cheaper for you. And thanks to that, you don't even have maybe to curtail electricity, which happens sometimes in Kyushu. So it's you don't waste electricity that is from solar PV market panels, and the industrial customers get electricity cheaper. So it's really a great combination. And we did it since April 21, and we already stimulated more than close to 20 gigawatt hour of electricity. So it's quite significant, and it's just starting. And last slide, I think, yeah. So here I wanted to say, okay, you have this carbon neutral for 2050. So it's a great challenge. There are so many issues. So you have too much sun relating to demand, and solar PV generation cannot be managed by the grid because it's too volatile, or the grid is not strong enough. So here you can curtail or build batteries. This is a solution. You have punctual extreme cold weather or demand peaks. So here you can, usually you would start super peaker power plants, so very high cost and emissions. They can be oil or gas driven. And of course you have climate change, so towards higher temperatures. So you can build more peak generation assets or reinforce the grid. So you can do that, but also, thank you. Or you can also, of course, leverage the collective strengths of all the consumers, all industrial customers. It can also even be residential. And really the philosophy between our approach and what digital can do is that producing more is not enough. Okay, it's great to produce more, to have a great technology. And we have seen really great examples by the previous speakers of what technology can do. But you also have to make an effort of to change the way you operate and consume from a company point of view. And here, digitalization, of course, is a key enabler. And there are many ways to do, for example, just consume more and produce more when there are too much solar PV. It's not something that comes naturally, but there can be really a lot of potential in all that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, merci Alain. It's very clear and very hands-on because you showed us concretely how some of these solutions, digital solutions, can help in terms of resiliency. And I think it's also a great transition for next speak because you do talk about sustainability here and really trying to optimize some of the energy generation. We will go more into the industrial world now with Dirk, who is our next speaker. Dirk is an associate partner at EY Japan. And in terms of sustainability, they have developed a data-driven process transformation approach that Dirk wanted to introduce. Dirk, I let you share your screen with us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent, and yeah, welcome everyone to this webinar, and thank you to everyone at the French Chamber for the opportunity to share what I have developed with my team. And so let me share my screen. First, I'm going to show you like an overview of what we have developed. So you should see my screen now. If you don't, please let me know.
It's all good.
Okay. So I think everyone is aware of yeah, the importance of ESG. Everybody's talking about it, especially about the E, the environment and carbon footprints that we have to manage better to yeah, to control global warming. I think we've all seen recently the hot weather in the Northwest in the US, which is very unusual, and those types of events becoming more and more frequent. And so we thought, going back to Matteo's point at the beginning, saying that when we look at organizations, very often they operate in silos. So there's one team for sustainability, and there's another team for finance, and another team for procurement. And we thought for sustainability, really for it to work well, it should be a topic where you consider, yeah, all factors at the same time, not just look at sustainability as an isolated topic, but in combination with other factors, in combination with cost factors when you have to make decisions. So we thought it would be good to utilize technology to develop something where we can do that, where we can consider cost and profit factors at the same time as sustainability factors. And the technology we used for the model is called process mining. Probably many of you will not be familiar with process mining, so let me just briefly explain what it is. Traditionally, we had data analytics. So what you do there is you look at output data and try to get insights by analyzing the output data, but you don't really understand the processes that happened before that generate the data. And for the last 10 to 12 years, there's now a technology available that makes those process flows visible. So you don't have to interview people anymore or review documents to understand how processes are executed, but you can use a software that visualizes all the process flows and all the variations. And yeah, if we look at the use cases that we have, over the last few years, they all focused on, or almost all of them focused on cost. And we thought, we have a lot of data on CO2 emissions. Why don't we include these data points in the model, and then we can consider cost metrics and CO2 metrics at the same time. So we developed a model that looks at the whole value chain. So we are starting with procurement process. Then we look at production, and then we also look at distribution and sales. So obviously, this is a manufacturing process, and we decided to do a tire manufacturing company for our prototype because it's easy to understand and visualize, but it can also be done for other industries. But yeah, we decided for tire manufacturer because, as I said, it's easy to understand. So yeah, here I just want to clarify that when we use process mining software, we do not have to replace any existing software that you run in your company. So this is basically an additional layer that you put on top of your IT infrastructure. So you will have ERP system, you will have some cloud applications. So we need to connect the process mining software to all the systems that you have, and then we can run it, we can configure it, and then we can visualize and analyze it. So yeah, our example was based on SAP because yeah, many companies use SAP, but it can also be done for other systems. Yeah, we visualize all the process flows in the different parts of the business. And then from that, we not only have better insights, but in the software, there's also functionality that gives us some recommendations on how to act. So with this tool, we think executives will be in a much better position to decide how they can achieve carbon emission targets, because yeah, quite often you have a CEO going public and saying, okay, this is the number we want to achieve. And then the rest of the executive team have to figure out how to do that. And that's very hard to do because you have incomplete information. And we think this tool will give you more and better information and will be a tool that gives you guidance on how to measure and how to track your progress against your CO2 emission targets. So with that, I would like to exit out of the presentation and go into the tool itself. So again, I'm assuming you can still see this.
Right now, we're still seeing your PowerPoint presentation. Maybe you
okay, so then I think I have
stop
to
sharing and share
Yep.
again the application itself.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So let's go to the most recent year. So let's look at 2020. And this is the executive summary dashboard that summarizes all the analysis that we have in our tool. So you can see the total CO2 emissions that we have for the year, the actual compared to the target. So we can see that for 2020, we are about 10% above the target. And then we can break it down into the various areas. So we can see that for the raw materials, we can compare the actual CO2 emissions to the target number. We can do it for procurement. We can see it for production and for downstream as well. So for all the different functions of the business. We can also do an analysis by location. So for example, we can go to Tokyo and we can see how much carbon emission we have in the factories in Tokyo. We can go to Europe, we can look at London, we can see how much we have there. So here we have a geographical analysis. And then here, this is another analysis we decided to include where we distinguish between like where the tires are used, trucks, passenger cars, or two-wheelers. And then at the bottom here, we have more detail on the different functions and where the CO2 emissions are coming from. And we always need to focus on what drives the CO2 emissions. So for the raw materials, it's really driven by quantity. So if we use more raw materials, then we have more CO2 emissions. For the procurement and the distribution, we assume that it's mainly driven by distance. So if we have to cover a higher distance, then we have more CO2 emissions, and we can track here how it's developed over time. And for production, it's driven by the number of total products. So the more we produce, the higher the CO2 emissions are. So we can have the overview here for the whole year. So if we then want to go into more detail, we can go into the procurement process. And the way we look at it now on the left-hand side, so we can see the different steps. And this is the traditional view. So we can see how often those steps are being performed. So if we say, besides the case frequency, I want to know how long it takes, I can change it. And now I can see, okay, between this step and the next step, it takes on average, or it takes 3 days on average. And so this is still the traditional view. If we say, if it takes longer, our costs are higher. And then we say, now we also want to see the CO2 rate that is being triggered by every step that we perform in the process. So we don't just count the number of instances we perform this step, for example, here goods received, but we also include the CO2 emission that is being generated by performing that. So we can see that here at the same time. And so these are the most common process flows. And what we can do with process mining, we can add steps and we can add activities. And while we do that, the graph becomes more complicated, and we can see more detail. On the right-hand side, we can see for the raw materials, for the logistics part, we can see which ones have a higher carbon emission footprint, and we can see that depending on where things are delivered. Here we have an analysis where we analyze by plants, so we can see which plants have higher CO2 emissions than others. And on the bottom right-hand side, we can compare different vendors that we procure from. So we can see some vendors, if we procure from them, our CO2 emission is higher than if we procure from another vendor. So this is a very good analysis tool as well. So being mindful of time, I cannot go through all the details, but I think the production one is also interesting. So let me spend a bit of time here. So on the left-hand side, again, we have the process analysis, which works in a similar way. We can see the iterations, and we can also see the CO2 that is caused by each iteration. On the right-hand side, we can look at the different types of tires that we produce, and then the CO2 emissions that we have, so we can compare by different types of tires. And we can even go further and analyze by the production steps. So we can see that in certain production steps, there are higher CO2 emissions than others. So we can see in the first two, generally the emissions are higher than in later ones. And then we can do further analysis down here where we can say, okay, which material goes in which finished product. And again, we can analyze that for CO2 emission footprint. The downstream movement is very similar to the procurement, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. It's a similar approach that we take. What I want to show briefly is quite a new feature we developed. It's a quarterly reporting, because you might be aware that there's new legislation that requires companies to report on various ESG matters, including carbon emissions, and on a quarterly basis. So listed companies need to do that in the US, but also in Europe. And so this analysis will give you the input to be able to report those numbers. So here we selected year 2020 and the second quarter, and then we can have the analysis for the total emissions and also for then for the raw materials for the production and for finished products, logistics, and raw materials. So it's a similar 4 different views that we had for the full year. So this will help tremendously with the new quarterly reporting requirements that are coming. Another feature that we have is a benchmark analysis. So we can compare different tires. So we can see that one tire, the cycle time is significantly longer than another, and we can also see the CO2 emission level of producing one tire compared to another. So we can do different types of comparisons and benchmarking analysis here. And so this is something we decided to do for different tire makes, but we can also do it for other things. So this technology is very flexible, and so it's not like a plug and play software, but it's something that we would tailor to every client who wants to use that. And the last thing I would like to show is the scenario planner. So this is something that we can assess very quickly. For example, we say, if instead of 14 tires of type 4, we want to have 25, so we can just change that. And then we can see the impact on CO2 emissions. And similarly, for the logistics, if we say we switch more from cargo to rail, if we change the quantities here, then we can see very quickly what's the impact there on carbon emission levels. So this is a pretty simple scenario planning. What we think can also be done in the future, and that's something that we want to do down the horizon together with the client. So this can be connected to companies' forecasting and planning, so that you don't just plan for quantities and cost levels, but you can also plan for the related sustainability impact. So this is something that we think can be developed in the future. Yeah, I could show you a lot more, but I understand we don't have so much time left for today, and we also should entertain questions. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and if you're interested to learn more about this solution, please yeah, just send me a message on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to go into more detail. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dirk. It was very interesting. And I think, yeah, we did talk about this. I mean, having this first measure of the carbon footprint of different solutions is obviously something very important, but also being able to propose different alternatives, either to management or to customers, and or of strategic different projects. That's something very important and hard to do. And I understand this is one of the solutions that you're implementing. Maybe I'll start with you with the first question regarding also the underlying data. So how challenging is it to access the underlying data? And maybe in the example you showed, obviously you are linked to one single system, SAP, or is it possible to link to several systems? What quality do you need in the underlying data? Because I think a lot of companies would be interested to learn how they could be using that.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So first of all, it can be linked to several systems, so not just one. And probably the most extreme case I've seen was Siemens. I think they had developed a model that they linked to 72 systems. I don't recommend doing that because it's a lot of work. It takes several years, but it's just a matter of effort, but it can be done. And then in terms of, yeah, it's easier to connect if you have a more integrated and connected IT infrastructure. Then it's faster to connect. If your infrastructure is more fragmented, it takes more time, but it can still be done. And maybe then it's also an incentive to maybe consolidate more And then sometimes the question is, what should we do first? Should we consolidate the system first, or should we implement a solution like this first? But yeah, in summary, so the solution is very flexible. So it can be connected to several systems and it can be done. And how complex the infrastructure is drives then the effort of implementation.
Yeah, and it links back, I think, to thank you, Dirk, to what Matteo was saying in terms of the legacy IT systems and what's already in place. And I was quite struck, Matteo, actually, by what you said in your presentation. The weight of legacy seems to be very strong. You talked about financial services, healthcare, IT systems, retail, and so on. Is there a way, maybe for Japan, because that's the main example that you were giving, that at some point they would be able to leapfrog kind of a generation and make this a force, or you don't foresee this in the near future and it will take a few years of playing catch up, and also maybe with the decision making in Japan may sometimes take a bit longer. So is that also kind of something that you see as a difficulty for Japan, or is there also there an opportunity?
It's both. Well, definitely, it is not something that can be achieved in a few months' time, but we see that progressing also in Japan. So we see many organizations in Japan going more aggressive toward cloud and commercial type of software implemented into their organizations. Still, the decommissioning of the legacy, which again in Japan is bigger than in other markets, it takes time. It takes time because it's embedded in the software, hardware, and the business processes are all interconnected. So how to phase a decommissioning along a decommissioning program is very complicated in order to avoid disrupting the business. But on the other hand, there's no other way. So there's no other way. I think that here we are in the situation where it is not possible to keep maintaining the 30, 40 years old IT legacy. It's not possible. I've seen many situations, and again, in Japan, much more than in other markets, where software provided by Microsoft or IBM is not supported anymore, but it is still in production in Japan. It's a very dangerous situation, right? So that is there's going to be a push anyway to decommission all that legacy, but it's going to take another 3 or 4 years, I would imagine. So it's not that COVID-19 magically now is pushing and making it modernized. It's going to take another 3 or 4 years.
It was a good first impulsion, but it will require further decision making by the leaders, I guess.
No, yes. I think on the decision making point of view, I see that happening much more quickly than just a couple of years ago. Definitely, there's no doubt that this is a recognized issue, and the decisions are taken. The problem is it's not anymore doing it or not doing it. Everyone wants to do it. Is the execution that is still a challenge.
Great, thank you, Matteo. You also talked in your presentation. You also talk about finding talent and maybe how it can be challenging. And I was struck that Alain, in your presentation as well, you talked about the fact that the data scientist is key in this. Obviously, you need some of the solutions, but you also need the data scientist. So I don't know if Energy Pool actually has data scientists based here in Japan, and if that's the case, did you face that talent, lack of talent, or difficulty in finding talent? Was that a difficulty?
First, our data scientist is not in Japan. You're right. They are in France and in Turkey, because the world is global, and if they work on the algorithms and test of models 2 hours or 3 hours with jet lag, it's perfectly doable. There is no issue. But I want to go back to what you asked, Matteo, because about legacy system, because I think it's quite important, and I think it's really the key here regarding Japan and the two-face, the kind of cliche contrast between, oh, they are super advanced, but at the same time they take care of traditions. They have this legacy system which are really awful, but at the same time they are super advanced here. This is what's happening here, and I think those legacy systems. Just to give you an example. Just seen very narrowly from Energy Pool, we have some customers say, oh, we cannot see your web portal, what's happening? The graph doesn't, and then you look at what they use Internet Explorer. And Internet Explorer in their company is mandated by the company. It's not that they want to use Internet Explorer. They say, of course, or we are not compatible. And then we are asked by some customers, oh, yeah, it's nice to send me an email, but please send me a fax. Say, what? So, and then we have to change our software to send a fax specifically for Japan. We have those legacy things, but I think at the same time, and Matteo touched upon it about the talent issues here. It's true, it's very difficult to find IT engineers and people who love IT here, but I think it's more kind of a society model. I'm sorry, I don't think we should do a society-related debate here, but it's really, when we try to hire people, and I'm sure people here have the same issue. When we try to hire people who speak English, you are good in IT, it's very difficult. And especially for small companies, startups. We are not in France, we are not in Silicon Valley. People, they still want to work in the big companies. Though you have this kind of big inertia. And when you talk to Japanese people, they are not allergic to software or digital, and they love technology, they love digital. So I think it's a problem of a kind of what is seen as attractive or not, where are the careers seen, what is the model of your career. And also, I'm sorry, I think it's really, there is a lot of issues regarding management. And Matteo was talking about agility. You could see it was very strong, when you see IT here, 5G and everything, Japanese can be very strong in infrastructure and project. Really, it's fantastic what they can do. But at the same time, in agility and in management mindsets, maybe they lag a little, but so I think the real bottleneck is here. And you were saying, can they catch up? I think they can catch up, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that honest view, but yet optimistic. Maybe Philippe, well, I don't know if you want to comment also on the legacy system, because I think it might be also something that you're facing, but also the question that I had, and I ask it as well now, is we saw your impressive examples of the digital twins. I was curious what the effort or the investment is required to create the digital twin. And is it also something that's doable or feasible for smaller companies or smaller projects, or is that more only dedicated to the large projects? So I was wondering if you could comment on this.
Yeah, so as you know, we do have already a good legacy in Japan. We've been operating for many years. So yes, it is a challenge for us to transition customers to the new technology. And as mentioned by everyone, it's not the desire to do it, it's how to do it, maintaining current existing processes while implementing others. But as mentioned, Japan is very innovative still. So new product development is at the heart of many companies, and that's the way that they're going to be able to do that transition from their legacy to what they need to do in the future. And I think that's why we're working with innovative companies here in order to do that. So now going to your point, transitioning there, when you think about smart cities, and yes, there are not that big project. In fact, when you look at it, it doesn't take a long time to integrate small areas of cities or slowly develop the city model. In fact, what takes more time is to aggregate all of the information that you can put in the city model in order to establish what new services can be developed and be found. And that takes some time, because that's the real effort that needs to happen. So we are working those projects, but there are several of them right now that we're working on. And the question is, what is the extent of what we can do with the platform approach? So with that, there are large companies that are really interested in how they can utilize their own data in order to understand what kind of new services they can. And then there are actually government organizations and local organization at the city level that wants to leverage those type of technology. So it's a starting point, and as you know, in Japan, sometimes we analyze for a long time to make project happen. But once things are established, then really it will take off. So I believe it's going to be the same for virtual cities.
Great, yeah, thank you so much for completing that view. Well, finally, to kind of conclude, I want to ask you all, I guess, questions. We've talked about digital transformation, and you've commented on this, kind of the challenges and opportunities. But now I want to talk about disruption. As Nicolas said in the introduction, we'll be talking in November at the Business Summit about 2050. 30 years from now, well, 30 years ago, I don't know if anyone would have predicted where we stand today. And I'm not asking you for any predictions, but maybe if we think about the next 5, 10, 20, maybe 30 years, is there anything that you really see in terms of disruption, or things that either you would like to see or that you kind of anticipate in the next decades? So I'm curious about your views, if you have any. It might be a difficult and challenging question to end with, but I think it'd be interesting.
So if you want me to start, well, obviously our legacy is certainly in the transportation and mobility industry for us. And in Japan, it's been a big industry, which it's transforming quickly. We're moving away from traditional automotive car makers to a mobility system. So it's going to have an impact on the way that people interact with transportation. So I believe that the mobility system over the next 5 years will already have changed, and the way that people interact with their city will therefore be changed. So 10 years, 15 years, obviously, there's going to be a big difference in the way that we see today car development and how cars are actually being utilized by people.
Great, thank you. Matteo, I saw you also unmuted. Maybe you want to go next?
Yes, no, exactly. That no, about your question of predicting the future, of course, is very difficult. And what I used to tell my clients, that instead of predicting the future, think about what you do and your capabilities. Agility, flexibility, ability to react to the situation. So whatever it happens, if you react quickly, you will be successful, right? So that's the first point. It's very difficult to really understand how the type of markets we are going to have in 5 to 10 years time. But in terms of disruption, I still believe that artificial intelligence is going to be disruptive. Now, somehow I have the understanding that artificial intelligence is developing, is not a straight curve. There are, like ups and downs. So you see for 1 year, big improvements, in Google Translate or Google Maps. And then for a few years, it stays flat, but then you have other accelerations. And we will see more and more of this. Probably in the next 5 years, we are still in the initial phase of AI. But if you ask me 10 years time, in 10 years time is going to be the future, completely disruptive. So yes.
Great, thank you so much. And we have a minute left for Alain and Dirk, if you have final predictions.
Yeah, so just talking about AI, so I think the fact that AI will come over the next 5, 10, 20 years, I think that's without question. So so the one thing maybe we should also focus on how much of those AI developments are desirable, like from an ethical perspective, yes. Because it can also be used in ways that let's call them dangerous, that we don't want to see. So I think it will definitely come. The question will be, how do we manage it? Will we manage it overwhelmingly to our benefit, or will there be also negative applications that we should try to avoid?
Yeah, thank you so much. You're right. Alain, you get the last word.
Okay. So if you think about AI, I think it's already there, and the way I see it, it's really just a fancy algorithm that goes very fast and through a lot of data, but it's great. And what I think is that, as you can see in energy, but you can see in many ways, all this digitalization and all this data processing, it helps and it allows to be more decentralized. And this decentralization, you see it everywhere, not just in energy. You can use things which used to be very centralized, which are now distributed, and not, you have energy, you can have mobility nodes. You could also have we talk about direct democracy, where you could have several layers of democracy embedded on top of each other, and they are allowed and enabled by digitalization. And I think that's really what digitalization can bring. It can bring to you more information, more data, and more informed decision, and to allow people to make more rational, more resilient, and more efficient decision and behavior. So I think that that's really key in digitalization. And just to also to take a word from Matteo, you don't know the future in 10, 15 years, you have no idea. But if you are flexible and quick, you will survive. So I think adaptability and be ready to go fast and be ready to fail and to correct course is really key.
Well, thank you so much, Alain. We didn't prepare this, but I think it was a wonderful wrap-up for the event. So I will cut my concluding words very short. Thank you to everyone who joined as participant, of course, and Matteo, Philippe, Alain, and Dirk, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insight and expertise. If any of the participants have any question or would like to connect with the companies or the speakers we had today, don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to put you in contact. And yeah, thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening. Goodbye.